good and we will improve.
Yeah, we'll yell.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. I'm Geri Sullivan, Sir She Her, and we're here to talk about what's good fan writing and where do you find it these days. I've got a couple of quick announcements, or at least one announcement. I understand that the H.G. Wells tour coach has been delayed thanks to us at the M3 traffic backup. So they are now expected around 2:15. They've been instructed to come in quietly and pay their trainings. I am moderating this fine thing, which means I need to have no expertise whatsoever. I just need to be good at asking questions, right? Right, agreed. And I'm going to do the really lame thing and let my fellow panelists introduce themselves. I believe I'm well enough known to everybody in the room that you don't need to hear my Spanish publishing history. So on the road, that was rude of me, but let's start with Roman.
Oh, hello, my name is Roman. I'm based in Adelaide, South Australia. I'm a radio broadcaster, fanzine fan, environmentalist, amongst other things.
Excellent.
I'm pretty cool with most of us, and not without feeling like they get these move the month of them. And because I go to different types of conventions, I'm well that sometimes other people have to go. Goodness.
Leigh, how are you?
My name's Leigh Edmonds. My pronoun, doctor. That's wanted to do that. My first fanzine was published in 1967, I think. I took a big break between about 1988 and about 2000 and something to go and do this PhD. But since then, I've been lured back in. So I don't really read many fanzines these days, but I think I might have some ideas about what good fan writing is.
That sounds absolutely excellent. And I realize that besides being rude, if we're gonna have these and catch up later, I should say, yes, Geri Sullivan, I got into fandom in the early 80s, and by the mid and late 80s, I started watching fanzines. Though I too went to my first store flu. Now you're at your second, but I went to my first store flu, having published a one shot and did in Atlasines. And the most notable thing recently is after a 23-year pause, I revived Idea, and I have issue 15 out at this convention. Look forward to getting more copies out. So our panel, fan writing was once found in fanzines. Where should we be looking to find the best work today? We, Z, Roman, and I are going to discuss whether this is still in fanzines, whether we should look to other online forums, and if so, which ones. Should we be looking back to older work that still stands up in the 2020s? And I want to start out with the real basics of, okay, we're talking about good fan writing. What are the attributes of good fan writing?
The first attribute is that it's written by fans. Now, that actually means something because fans write in a particular way for fandom to read.
You're looking for stuff where it's the community in communication with itself.
Exactly. Yes. Well put. Well put.
I think you're looking for stuff that's interesting and well written.
Yeah,
And if I was looking for stuff that's interesting and well written, I'd buy, mundane magazines, because a lot of them are full of very good writing. If we're going to talk about fan writing, then it has to be a particular kind of writing by a particular kind of person.
That doesn't mean it can't be interesting and well written.
Oh, no, indeed. Some of the best fan writing is not about fandom at all, but it's about people's lives as, well, I think through the filter of fandom. I think that maybe that gives a particular view, or the understanding of the audience gives a particular view. Make sense?
Yeah, but can you elaborate on that a little bit? That feels like an
Oh,
overview.
I've been at conventions where someone's asked me to elaborate 20 minutes later.
Oh, I won't let you go.
Can I ask you a question, Leigh?
Yes, yes.
Does this mean it has to talk about a particular community, Or can we get good fan writing that doesn't even mention the
Oh,
community?
indeed. I mean, I was thinking of Big Dave's contribution in this year before last about Sylvia. One of the best pieces of fan writing I've written in a long time. It's not abandoned. It's about the relationship between these people. And it's about dementia. Now, dementia is something we all, well, let's not talk. Anyhow, what was I talking about again?
You just reminded me of Chris Priest's world, which, you know, is a fantastic piece both of writing, but fan writing because it was Chris doing it, but we're talking about, you know, early Beatles history, that piece could be printed anywhere.
I think, in fact, a lot of the best fan writing could be published anywhere. It's just that we fans write it for us to read.
Yeah.
Some of it, now I'm thinking about John Baxter, because I interviewed him in Paris. John Baxter would write stuff for fanzines, which would also go into other places, which he'd get paid money for, but it might turn up in Trapdoor or somewhere. And on the other hand, John Baxter, well-known fan writer, deliberately decided not to become a commercial writer. He looked at the idea and he said, I don't want to do that. I want to be a fan writer for that particular community in that particular way.
So we best talk.
Right.
Thank you, Sandra. You just reminded me. I also mentioned at the beginning to hold the audience a little bit. Is there anything in particular that any of you are hoping we should talk about in terms of family? And if you want to think about that for a few minutes and talk in, great, or if you have something right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speak up. You guys are very quiet.
That's also, they're on the bus.
I'm sorry, we have people here in the room who are on the bus, but they're not on that.
So, Geri, can I put the question back to you?
Sure.
A little more. You tell us what you think.
We're gonna jump ahead of, yeah, that's what makes it good. That's nebulous because it's something that engages me and lots of different things engage me, make me keep reading, make me want to read. Sometimes make me want to throw things across the room, but that's fine too. So the what, you know, it's like, it's engaging. It's nice if there's, you know, it's like, yeah, ego boo is always appreciated. Oh, if my name's in there, ego scanning, that's fun. But I'm still struggling back with the fan writing by definition is written by a fan. Because I don't have examples tonight, that I have certainly encountered things out in professional publications or other places that just, they feel like fan writing. They read, they walk like a duck, they talk like a duck. I could have found it in any good fanzine and really click that good fanzine in that piece. And it'll be by someone I don't know at all. And I wonder whether that's because fandom has gotten so big and so diffuse that, you know, there are people out there who, if they connected, they would be fans. But we don't know them and they don't know us, so.
So there's definition of not famous. So that's not the community. Yes. I disagree.
Yeah.
But I do disagree that if I'm reading one of the literary magazines that we say in Australia, and I'm thinking, gee, that's a good bit of writing, but that's not my family. So if we're talking about good writing, that's one thing, we can talk about good writing, but if we're going to talk about good fan writing, how do we distinguish between them?
I think it's worth noting that in such a meteoric growth and that don't necessarily indicate shared end material. There's lots of stuff around the place, and it's not necessarily what you might immediately think was Spanish.
No, but I agree with the point. That's about communication within the community.
Yeah, that's the really strong point.
So if I had to get a copy of The Age for some reason I can't understand, and there's a good poem in there. And I think, yeah, well, John Benson could have written that. That doesn't make it fan writing, that makes it good writing.
And I'm a fan writer, it's also a food writer for Pillsbury for a while. Pillsbury, although I published that a little bit comments of the it was very that. That was not fan. That was professional food service.
Yep.
Okay, what kinds of fan writing do we each find most appealing? And I'm gonna kind of, that got me in thinking of okay, what kinds of fan writing are there? There's a wide variety, there's personal essays, there's trip reports, there's convention reports, there's reviews, there's rants. There's fan fiction, the different kinds of fan fiction. There's fan humor, either as a standalone or incorporating anything that's on this list. There's poetry, there's commentary, this is about fandom. There's newsscene material, there's fan history, there's real world issues. What else? Because I feel like anything can be, but what do folks most enjoy reading and or publishing in terms of what kind of fan writing are you looking out for? Right, gave you this question over a week ago. I think I have a question.
I think there are reviews everywhere, you can find endless number of reviews. I can read nothing's done that reviews don't on to you that I think.
Bingo. Agreed.
Other things I'm open to many other things. I am open to everything from an interesting cocktail recipe to some incredibly gossip, to a little bit of fiction or whatever else. But I think I can put the issues aside for the time and add something because everything gets fitting in at times. Find that in the Times or the Guardian or anywhere else.
And
But the trick is that you want the reviews to be
Good.
witty, interesting to read,
Maybe,
unexpected viewpoints.
maybe that's one of the things that separates, differentiates fan writing from other kinds of writing is that good fan writing is also witty. So that you can talk about, well,
no, very comparable.
some of it's also like a sense of the not quite real. This is a hypothesis working for something else. I think that a fanish view of the world is slightly out of focus or at a different angle to reality, to the mundane world, which gives it a different perspective, so that a fan could be writing about the general election, but have a different view on it than what you will read in the press.
I think you might need to point toward the.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm talking to them rather than you. Sorry about that.
I suspect something more than that. So I suspect we have materials that will talk about this fan writing, which is because it's been written by someone who's been involved in various ways as a fan, but the writing can well have appeared anywhere else.
Mm.
If you're doing this because you love it and you're willing to do it for free, but if someone wants to pay you, I think that's fantastic. You pay for that. If you're doing this because it's your job and you cannot do it, even if it is a sparkling, witty, delightful piece of fantasy media, probably not analyzing it, it's not you're doing it for the use, it's an individual paycheck.
I'll take a little issue with that because in the ideal world I like to live in, or the eternally optimistic world, you'll actually care about your job. You enjoy what you're doing in your job because you're spending so much of your life there. Yes, you have to pay the bills and put food on the table, but that makes for a dull life and very few fans are dull. But I do the differentiation of what is the purpose of this particular piece of writing, the joy we bring into it when you're writing something and you kind of go, oh, I know that this is going to crack Nigel Lowe up. I know that picking up a pack of Weetabix at breakfast and handing it to Claire, and then she puts it in the picture in the Discord where the badges are here, and there's the Weetabix. And I get a little bit of fun of, oh, I gave her that Weetabix, that connection, and the things you do because you know they will bring joy to other specific people or other kinds of fans that you know.
We're really talking about a sense of community.
Yeah, yeah, always.
I agree.
Whoa, golly.
What we have to do is bring capitals and then finally got a definition.
My social, I just agree with him.
Oh, don't worry, I just think it's a useful tool sometimes.
What for? Never mind. Well, no, I didn't realise we were talking about politics. There is, of course, Spanish politics and,
No.
There's more than one Spanish politics. Come on.
never mind. I'm not going to talk about politics, but otherwise I'll get excited and start waving my hands around. And that's not a good thing. Back to this business of, we need to talk about, see, the only fan writing I read is in traditional fanzines, i.e., sorry, not paper anymore because it's done through PDFs, through the two appers I'm in, or from the fanzines that I get through fanzines. That's the only fanzine writing that I could read. Now, I know there's other stuff around this stuff is short, and I've got other things that have to be done at the same time. So that I'll go to the fanzines, I'll say, so I've produced a fanzine and have a read of that. Or there will be the two appers I'm in, and there'll be interesting writing there. Now, that makes me think about the different kinds of writing for different kinds of audiences in fan. So, for example, when I get a copy of Banana Wings, for example, then Claire and Mark have written specific pieces of writing that are in themselves good pieces of writing. But if you come to ANZAC where they sit down and they say, today is the 29th of February, this is what's happened, this is what I'm thinking. It's a different kind of writing for a different kind of audience. So maybe when we're talking about good fan writing, we also need to talk about a good fan audience for that. Sorry, we need to talk about a good fan audience for that kind of writing. So that you write, goes back to this idea of community. You're writing for a community and you're imagining the people that you're writing for when you're writing. So when I'm writing an academic article, I'm not imagining anyone. I'm just imagining that I'm hopefully making academic grounding points for something or some, yeah, that's beside the point. So that we have to think about who we are writing for and the way that we are presenting ourselves in the different formats that we use. So, for example, before we started, we said we're going to talk about the various electronic ways in which fan writing is now presented. And if you're presenting it in an electronic way, you're thinking about a different kind of audience than if you're writing for an app with 30 members or 9 members, 9 or 10 members. You're thinking more intimately about the people that you're writing for. But if you're writing for a PDF fanzine that's going to go to a fanzine, you're thinking about a different audience again. But if you put it on the World Wide Web as a fanzine or whatever, then you're thinking about a different kind of audience again. So you're writing differently. Am I right?
No.
Elaborate.
Watch you online, so social hearing you see, so you may need to speak up.
Is that any better? I hope that's a bit better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, speak much closer to the microphones, please, because if I try and turn the volume up, it
Yes. I do
goes
like feedback.
buzz. Sorry about that.
Feedback, good.
Not that feedback.
In terms of writing for an audience, even when you're writing online and you're putting it on a blog where anyone with internet access could potentially find it, you are still very often writing for a specific audience. So you will have regulars, you will have people that you know follow your blog, you will have a handful of people that you know turn up in the comments. And those are the people you're writing for. You've got the digital equivalent of the people who like to write letters to your fanzine, except with a much faster response time and sometimes less filtering. And you have to always edit it before their comment comes live. but you are still writing toward that specific community, and it's not necessarily writing for everyone on the internet when you're putting it out there for everyone on the internet. You're still very often writing for this specific group of people, and if anyone else on the whole internet finds it, great. Maybe they can join this specific group of people.
Can I read, can you hear me? Can I redirect what was I going to talk about? Can I redirect the conversation a little bit to actually the length of writing? Because when I was in America last year, I spent a week at UC Riverside looking at fanzines from the 50s and 60s. And it seems to me that our attention span, the length of things that we write is shortened.
Yes.
Back in the good old days, good perhaps, people would write an article on pages and pages and pages, and it would be carefully argued and carefully reasoned. Now, there are reasons for this that I'll write about somewhere else. But these days, in the fanzines, the PDF fanzines I read, you'd be lucky to get an article that runs for 2 pages. And I think that we're not challenging ourselves as writers to think as much about what we're writing. I think we may be writing more to entertain than to expound ideas or to develop ideas. You look puzzled, Roman.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking about writing because the 3 things I point out. First of all, in the early days of the internet, you had a whole raft of sites that had groups of people who were discussing stuff. They were writing stuff in there. And, it was a small, could be a small, very large collection of people who were constantly looking at that particular site to see what's written. A bit later, you had the growth of podcasts. So rather than writing, they'd be talking about something, sometimes at prodigious length. And you can think, well, yes, they have written it because they've also got these transcripts of everything they've talked about. That is a classic example. They're very long about very specific things that are very Spanish, but not necessarily very entertaining. And indeed, we've also seen the growth in certain efforts, which is quite interesting. And the reason that ANZAPA still exists, Australian New Zealand Amateur Press Association, is with COVID and the sheer cost of printing and delivering by email material to overseas members, ANZAPA decided to go online. They never reduced the PDF that would then be available immediately over the internet for all the members. And that's actually turned out, I think, to be quite successful in various ways. And I think is one of the reasons that ANZAPA is still a fairly large group, 29 members at home.
I think that in the most recent mailing, David said that if most people are interested, we will have a waiting list.
Your comment Leigh, about length. I believe that's one of the ways in which the world has changed, and because of the internet. And the fun little thing that's happened to me in the last couple of weeks is I published an idea. There are 2 people, Ben Yellow and Vince Doherty, who only want the PDF. I prefer to send print copies to anyone who doesn't object to having print, but they only want PDF. I mail those directly rather than waiting until they get up on eFanzines or Fanac. And so I set off and then probably close to a week later, Banana Wings, who distributes both in print and electronically, sent Ben his copy of Banana Wings. And before Claire, actually Mark mentioned at dinner something Ben had said in a letter, but Ben had told me he has not started reading idea, but he's already both read and sent a letter of comment to Banana Wings. And it's like, well, Banana Wings is shorter. Ideas are straight, it's a barrier, right? It's a barrier. And I'm kind of going, okay, that actually does make some sense. And then a few days after that, John D. Berry sent out that fanzine, semicolon is this issue.
Yeah.
And it was 4 pages long. And I am horrible at writing letters of comment to anything. And I said that, and I read that, and I sent him a letter of comment within like an hour. But it was only 4 pages long. It was, so the accessible size chunks get more response. And I don't, I'm not gonna start publishing itty bitty little fanzines, because that's not me. And that's not what idea is, but I'm aware of how my choices in what I'm publishing have a negative impact on feedback and what I hear back from people, so.
And I'd just like to mention here that with another couple of friends in Adelaide, we do a podcast called and 56 episodes of it. What we actually do is get together once a month and each of us talks about something for about 5 minutes, and then each 5-minute talk is a separate episode. So we deliberately decided we do a podcast, but we wouldn't make it a humongously long 4-hour long podcast. We'd make it 5 minutes, so people can just listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and move on. So that's one of the things happening. I mean, there are other things happening a lot. That group example is with scope fanzine. And it at heart it's an HTML page. Which means it does something very well, like footnotes are really easy. You just click on the footnote and it suddenly appears, you read it, it goes away, you read the main article. And it's a single page, but you can also get it as a PDF. But I think the HTML format is actually quite a nice one, because it's readable on a whole range of different.
Yeah.
And you can read it on your iPhone, with a computer,
Your pixel.
yeah. And that's quite nice, because if you're having problems with the size of the font, you can actually increase, change the font size, fonts it's displayed in, which are both nice features that you can do with an HTML format.
You can do that.
I'm not
Notice in my PDF that you can click, if you're looking at the new PDF, you can click on any of the links and go to whatever the website is that. Yeah, magnifying, but that's fancy on one of these.
I'm saying the nice thing about it is, it will automatically set up so it automatically reacts to the size of your screen. Because we did do an HTML online magazine called Wild Goose. And you can grab one of these, you can go to wildgoose.net, put in the issue number and click on the cover issue and get the content page. And it does actually adapt to the reading device. And one of the reasons we did it that way, we wanted to experiment what could be done. Responsive online. And so I think what's happening is that we're discovering other ways of producing fanzines that are, in a certain sense, cheaper, that you don't have to print them all and then mail them all, and actually deliver them electronically to people. And whether it's a PDF, fixed format stuff, or a responsive HTML format, I have a certain fancy for the responsive HTML format, but it's still at heart, it's still a fanzine and various kinds of fanwriting appearing in an issue. And it's been designed so the online Wild Goose is actually a particular issue, issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, etc. So that's one of the things that can be done.
Let's go. Okay, you're close to done.
Just about done. I could also mention that Periscope is also had. You can deliver the fanzine online via email.
Both Periscope and Biblioscope. Periscope is produced by Perry Nichols, very nice level, and Biblioscope by David Grigg, and it grows out of their podcast. So if you listen to their podcast, you listen to at least half the material that goes into everything you said. Yeah, your comments.
I want to get Sandra, you want to come on?
Oh, I was gonna say one, but it's easy to forget. With modern technology and modern.
The mic you. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So say it's easy to forget with modern technology, modern methods of distribution, etc. Yeah, we've actually come to an extent full circle, because back in the day, you know, up until the 1970s, in fact, I think, British fanzines in particular, members of British fandom had very, very little spare income. So their fanzines tended to be quite short, quite pithy, and you know, there was many running jokes about the fact that the print went right the way to the edge of the paper because, you know, they wanted every sort of space that was available to them. That was how precious it was. And then, you know, with the passage of time, fans started to get more disposable income and fanzines got longer. And now, as you say, we've returned to the starting point where instant gratification and, you know, and other factors too probably mean that we've now returned back to the stage to where we began with regards to men. But there was a joke in the 1970s, I think it was one of Roy Kettle's. Until I met Rob Jackson, I thought that justifying margins meant acknowledging that the staples had to go somewhere.
One of the things that used to be important in fanzines was the postage rate.
Yeah.
And how many pages you could get in. In Australia, it was 18 pages, or if you were lucky, 20. So fanzines ran for 18 pages.
We are just barely over halfway through this, so I'm going to turn our attention to the where. This is the core question of this panel. Where is the good family these days? All the good family. And I believe we're going to start this one with Z because they've done some interesting things here.
So everyone here knows where they can get the fanzines that everyone here knows about already. There is nothing I can tell you on this mark that you do not already know. There is no point in me trying to repeat that. So instead, I did the sensible thing, and I went to a couple of the Discord servers I'm on, full of people who are mostly under the age of 40 and mostly under the age of 30, and went, lads, I'm on a panel tomorrow. I haven't done a lot of preparation for it. The panel is about where do you find good fan writing. Here are some examples of what we consider to be fan writing, and just copy and paste the list that Geri sent. Promptly then, a dozen people immediately went, oh, fantastic, a chance to talk about the stuff I've been reading lately. And bombarded me with links and recommendations and everything else. Almost all of which has been online. There were a lot of recommendations for Tumblr, a blogging website which may soon die, but which I'm still on and have been for over a decade because it's reliable and it allows long-form text. When so much of the people on there, there's recommendations for Cory Doctorow. I know that there might be some debate about whether we would consider him to be fan writing in this sense. It's a massive nerd writing specifically for an audience of massive nerds about the areas that he's interested in, which is mostly data security. Alexander Wales, Nostalgia Breast, does delightful fiction and original writing, as the reason of that. But you also have like Diane Duane, puts all of her, everything that we would call a person is on the Tumblr blog instead. You want to find out about what's been happening lately, about what's been read, about the reviews, about the comments, about the recommendations, about the reminiscing. It's on her blog. Other recommendations, several people said, try YouTube. Jenny Nicholson and Lindsay Ellis in particular love to do long, deep dive essays into a specific niche Spanish topic, specifically for other people who are either not familiar with it yet or who already know, who they can count on to then be in the comments going, actually, like a proper letters page. We've got a couple of podcast recommendations as well, Fansplaining, Fanfic Harbor. We've got recommendations to people's original blogs as well, Arimia Dev. Everyone knows Jason Sanford after what happened with the Hugo Chengdu coverage. But yeah, online in a million different places is my main answer. And my secondary answer comes in the form of these tiny colourful pamphlets. Because I go to a variety of types of convention and I go to media conventions, the type the types that have 50,000, 100,000 attendees. They are crowded, they smell bad, and I don't like them. However, what they do have is they have an artist's alley. And if you go down that artist's alley, you will find tiny original fan artists who are selling, they're selling usually prints, posters, some little books they've made themselves, and a bunch of them will also have little zines like these, cheap things, cheaply printed, that they are selling you for about £2, which is the cost of printing it, stapling it, and covering having a table at the convention. And if they're very, very lucky, you might make them enough money to have a couple of beers later.
I love the idea of tiny little fan.
You can't even remember. But it's stuff that we are not finding at more traditional science fiction conventions, and it's stuff that we're not finding online. So the answer to where is the good fan writing is, it's in the places we're not looking at the moment, because we may not know they exist, because they exist in different ways from each other. But they're still fans and still talking to each other. We just have to actually
Make a
go there.
connection, yeah. So can you put your list in Discord for this program?
Yes, I'm happily compile.
That'd be great. And then, I don't know that we're actually going, one of my aspirations is for the memory book we have for this is to have contributions from all of us and anybody from the audience that wants to, let's put together a list of resources and share that with each other. That would be, others, where's the big fan writer on?
Depends where you're looking. I mean, there's lots of stuff online, and probably whatever fan group you're involved in, they, have you got this, that, and the other? There's so many different fan groups that might well be focused on Star Trek, Star Wars, films,
Fan history.
fan history, whatever. For example, I mean, we have groups in Adelaide that also do these type of things. Not necessarily that size, but they're more thinking of them as artists putting together a compilation. Whether you call it fans is an interesting question. So you look at them and think, what would be like a fanzine? But I don't think they think of themselves as science fiction now.
Yeah.
They think of themselves as artists producing a magazine.
Right.
So there's a huge variety. I think there's lots of stuff online, and if you think of a topic or something, you may well be able to search for it to see if you find something interesting. Just be careful what to search.
Right.
There are obvious sites like fanac.org and eFanzine, which collect a lot of traditional fanzines, typically in PDF. You've got a whole lot of stuff online that are often distributed as email newsletters, which have quite a nice, you get a large, effectively a large HTML page that might take you an hour or so to read, or depending, how deep it is. But it's probably 3 or 4 pages printed if you print it out. But you get it on your phone or on your computer, you read it, you can respond to it immediately. You can save a copy if you want to further reference. So you need to have a look at those as well, I think.
Yeah.
Because lots of fans are doing email newsletters because it's a nice way to distribute fanzines as opposed to ordinary, and ask your friends. There's a lot of the fanzine that they're interested in.
Leigh, did you want to go, and then I've got some to add?
Yeah, my trouble is, you see, that I'm old-fashioned. Sorry, I'm not old-fashioned. I'm to the extent of my days are too short to actually go looking in the sites that you guys have just been talking about. I have enough trouble with going to fanzines and thinking, well, there's too much here for me to look at. So to go into the other places, just isn't within my sort of universe. Not because I'm not interested, but because there's just not enough hours in the day to do this. So fandoms become so big that even to try and keep up with File 770 is beyond my attention span. So that all the other stuff that's going on is just too difficult. Now, I was going to talk about, if I may, briefly, the fact that one of the advantages of the old style fanzine is that it is paper. And paper paper is forever, at least for a long time, whereas the internet is volatile. From the various formats that you use, blogs, not so much overwrite themselves that the blog page becomes so long that what's there you don't look at. You only look at what is new. The same with Facebook and many other media. You look at what's current, not at what happened in the past.
You can't find what you know you read before and you want to find it again and reread it. It's darn near impossible.
Yeah.
Well, it depends where they put in tags as to topics and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's also,
You can find linked articles.
you can, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. The fact is that there's been a change in the way that this community communicates with itself. But what interests me as a historian is the fact that we have left behind us, our community has left behind a paper trail that stretches back to 1930s. And that paper trail has now disappeared. It's gone to other media, which is fine. That's the way the community communicates with itself now. But how it reflects on itself is a different thing, because one of the things that worries me about the internet and social media is it's not reflective. It's about what happens now. It's about what you're thinking about now. We're thinking back to what happened in the past. The problem with that, with not doing that, is that you don't have a way of comparing yourself or thinking about yourself in relationship to other people at other times. We've now lost our historical knowledge of what fandom was. Now, that's fine, because fandom has always been about the present. The fanzines that produced in the 30s, 40s, and 50s weren't about the past, or very rarely about the past. They were about the current, what was going on. It's just that the delivery time was different. So that in Australia, for example, maybe if you want to communicate with America, you know it's going to take it 2 months. Whereas these days, but the point of this exercise, the point I want to raise is that what interests me as a historian about fandom is the paper trail. And the paper trail is now gone. No doubt all this stuff is being archived somewhere. How it will actually be understood in the future, and how it will be interpreted in the future, is the problem that interests me as a historian. It's not to say that good fan writing isn't happening in a multitude of media, in a multitude of places. But we can go back to hyphen, we can go back to Haverings, we can go back to Horizons, we can go back to La Zombie, we can go back to a number of fanzines. They're there, they're in archives, we can read them. We can understand Walt Willis's point of view, we can understand Bob Tucker's point of view, we can understand what things were like in the 1940s. We can read Good Fanwriting there. How do we get to Good Fanwriting that is 3 months old?
You can definitely get to good fanwriting, which is 3 months old,
If you know how to do it.
if you are familiar with how these things work.
Yeah.
But this isn't much the same way as historically. Yeah, you've got the latest paper issue and you have whatever paper issues you have previously subscribed to. How do you get any history beyond that? You have to hope that maybe one of your mates has a bunch of older archive stuff they want to share with you. So, even if it is.
In fact, FANAC is digitising everything, but it's in a standard PDF format that even I understand. It doesn't use the modern technologies that you guys are talking about. And it concerns me, as a historian again, that these modern technologies are not going to be so easily accessible. But that doesn't make, this is away from the business of the small zines. That there used to be a shop in Melbourne called what's it called, Sticky Corner? I can't remember now. And it was full of these.
That was the one near the front station.
Yeah, it was one at Flinders Street, which has now been closed. And I used to go in there and look at these things, and there'd be hundreds of these things. And I actually took a day to go, not a day, several hours to go through every one, and none of them had a letter of comment column. They're all self-referent, they're all self-contained. So that although they probably go to zine conventions or whatever they do, gee, that sounds ignorant. And they talk to each other. What they produce does not refer to other people, or they may copy trends about what's going on, but they don't, none of them had what in science fiction fandom has become the staple of the community, which is the letter column.
Yeah. And that's back to the community and talking with each other, and letter columns is a way for people, even new people coming in, to connect and get to know the people. The thing that I don't remember,
I've just remembered one other place that can be a decent source for zines outside the things you're normally looking for. Near my work, there is a little leftist bookshop. It's up by King's Cross. It's been there for ages. They have many books of theory and biographies and histories and all that sort of thing, but they also have a wall of assorted zines. Some of these are professionally published, and some of these are so questionably photocopied you think that it was made in primary school in 1995. But they're there, and you can get all of these different things. It's a potluck. Some of them are terrible. I have picked up some that I thought would be great and were wildly disappointing. But they're there. And
Now
I
I-
just have to go to the weird independent bookshops, preferably run by punks.
now I have 2 points. I've got 2 things, and maybe somebody said this and I missed it, but I'm realizing in this new issue of Idea, the article by Graham Charnock and the article by Kurt Phillips both first appeared on a mailing list. They were posted, people made their mailing list, and it was like, this is great, can I have this for Idea? And so, again, taking something that wasn't a small community, and sometimes they'll rework it a little bit to make it more appealing to the larger community. But that's a place that works. What I want to address, which goes with good fan writing and fanzines, is this point of some of them are. And when I first started publishing Idea back in the late 1980s and 1990s, it's like, there is a role. Crap fanzines are really important. And even crap fan writing is really important. Because
Essential to the ecosystem.
you see something that is glorious and wonderful, you knew this, and you read an issue of Hyphen, or you read an issue of Banana Wings, or dare I say it, you read Idea, or what I hope Idea can be. And you go, oh, that's really good, I could never do that. And you appreciate it, but you don't feel like, oh, this is something I could do. And then somebody publishes a piece of, and you go, I could do better than that. And people go out and do it. And it's really like Z says, it's an invaluable, vital piece of the ecosystem to have crap that people will go, I can do better than that. It empowers them and they go for it, and we get better stuff. In a way, it's nice to have glorious examples of how good it can be, but if that's all there is, people get put off and they don't feel confident that they could do that too. So.
I'm just going to make the point, actually a good point. The latest issue of Warner's Opera, of which I have 4 copies, 3 copies left. 2 of the articles there, one is an article lifted off of a Facebook post, and the other one is an article that was written for the West Australian newspaper several years ago. So there's only one original contribution in there. The rest are lifted from other places. It's just that because I'm old-fashioned, I still like to have, there's only 4 copies of this. The rest are PDFs. But I still, because I like the format, that's the way I do it. There are many other ways to do it. Rowan and I, apart from the fact we know each other's secrets, so we can't really hit each other, would come to loggerheads about the best ways in which to do finished writing. It's just that. Roman prefers one, and I just prefer the old-fashioned way. And it's really a matter of taste, I think.
Okay. Barry, I think you have something that most.
Right. Can I go back to this business about fanzines? Because there are 3 things. I've started producing this thing called the Australian Journal of Fannish Research. Now, there are 3 reasons for doing this. The first reason is because the idea first came up when Perry Middlemas and I were having lunch at a university. And of course, universities got a particular air about them, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. The second reason is because you may or may not be aware that there is a field of academic studies called fandom studies. It's quite a literature. There's an annual journal. There's in fact one journal called Journal of Fandom Studies. But there are several others, cultural studies, academic journals, which will publish articles about what they call fandom. Now, what they call fandom comes from a generation of people who were either punks or were media fans, so that they may know that the word fanzine was invented. The first fanzine was published in 1930. But when it comes to the discourse, their idea of what a fanzine is begins in about 1970, 1980. So that there's a whole, 40 years of fanzines that exist before that these guys do not know about or don't care about. Now, so that I'm reading this literature, doctor, remember? I'm reading this literature and I'm keeping on finding out that the people who are writing in particular the Journal of Fandom Studies have no idea that we exist, or they don't care that we exist, or the other thing that they don't understand is that when they come to the archives that have been preserved, and I know there are many archives in America that are being preserved because of FANAC did the discussion, a month or so ago, and I know of four university archives in Australia that have got fanzines, but they don't understand what it is they've got because they don't understand the culture. Now, fandom is a particular science fiction fandom as it evolved from 1926 through to sometime in the 80s or 90s, maybe before media fandom or punks. Developed a particular kind of culture, a particular way of seeing itself, a particular way of referring to itself, and all this is preserved in the archives in the American, the Australian, and maybe the British universities. Now, the problem is that when these guys come to this stuff, because I've read this stuff, they don't understand what it is they're looking at. They think, for example, one of them is that they think that fandom is counter to mundane culture. They don't see this parallel to or anything else. They think that's a counter culture. And I think this comes from the idea of punks, that punk is counter. And in fact, feminist fanzines are counter to, mundane world. Whereas science fiction fandom is something different. I'd like to think it's sort of an alternate reality. We're not countering anything, we're just parallel to. Anyhow, that's a hypothesis I'm working on. But the simple point of the matter is that for people in the future, academics, because this fandom that we're here talking about will be gone in 20 years' time.
So who's reaching out to tell them about these things?
This is
they don't, or they don't know this.
HAFR, that's the point of this, is to actually speak academic or speak quasi-academic, so that the people who are doing their PhDs or doing their masters will hopefully, I've got to spread this, if this gets spread around in fandom, that's nice. Because I need fans to write about this stuff to explain the culture to mundane. I need the point of this exercise. Mundane is just a way of explaining. See, I don't see that as counter. That's it. Anyhow, let's not go there for the moment.
Okay, but we're some stuff in that too. Why don't you get some things from the audience?
Exactly. So, the attempt to actually reach into universities with their connections and their academic understanding with this, which is a quasi-academic thing. Also a fanzine, because it's got to be written so that fans will read it. I'm selling copies for £1, and for each one, you'll get a free copy. No, complimentary sounds better. You will get a complimentary content.
Yeah, very important.
So that's my sales pitch. But
If I can jump in, Pat Versey and I think most of you know, but we are publishing The Spirit of Corfu, History of Corfu by Corfluvians. For people who have already written for us or who are committing to write for us, I have really lovely little pins that Pat made up. They're gorgeous design as always. And I will be writing you this weekend as many people as I can. We have got Dan Stephens doing the cover, we've got articles by a variety of people that I could, don't have time to go down the list now. But we are looking at having this out this summer and, looking, we want, again, the conversation and everybody coming to Corfu and stuff. Give us vignettes, give us stories, memorable things from Corpus. So thanks on that. And idea 15 is out, and if I haven't given it to you yet, come hook up with me and I'll, do that. So other closing comments on these guys and a few minutes for any audience comments.
I think I've kind of covered everything already. If
You
you
see,
want to, I think, go to new places.
And as someone who is a nominator of a different TAF candidate, Z Graves is standing for TAF. Voting ends next Wednesday, a week from, just after EasterCon, but an extra day after EasterCon. Sandra, one of the administrators this year, you can do the TAF one. Yes, ballots.
Yes, I do have ballots. Can I comment on the subject of the panel?
Oh, please.
Okay, this is probably, given the demographic of Corfu, this may be by way of throwing a hand grenade into the punch bowl.
Oh, go for it.
But fan fiction.
Yep.
There was once an idea that the only fiction that was written by fans was what could be sold professionally. That is
Bullshit.
if that was ever the case, and it may well have been, but it certainly isn't now.
No.
And there is an awful lot of terrible fan fiction on AO3 and fanfiction.net. There is also an incredible amount of really good stuff that is, every bit as good as what would be professionally published, except that it's someone else's intellectual property.
Yeah.
So, if you want to, broaden your horizons a little, and if there's any particular sort of universal TV show or whatever, or comic that you're particularly interested in, you may find, that there's some surprisingly fun stuff out there on AO3 in that universe.
As someone who is familiar with that particular quarter of fandom and indeed runs events and challenges in that, I can also assure it's okay. We do have safe for work stuff as well. It's not all stuff.
Okay, let's go right back to Farah and then up to Keith. Or the person in the green shirt and the. All right.
I was really interested in comments on academia. And one of the things I saw happen over 30 years is the concentration of science fiction studies in literature departments. The collapse of sociology as a discipline is being replaced by cultural studies, which I have nothing against, but it is not sociology. And I recently discovered I would not actually be eligible to take one course because all my degree, they wanted a literature degree. And none of my degrees are in literature.
Wow.
I'm a historian. So the way you're thinking is the way I think, which is archive-based, interview-based, but crucially, lots of sources. And to those of you who aren't in any of the literary fields, my English literature colleagues, when they're writing a PhD, will pick, say, 7 or 8 texts. My students end up looking about at 300.
Yeah.
And in terms of us as a thing to be studied, that works much better. Because if you're, as you said, if you're looked a few of the best, you actually aren't going to feel the fields the way you would if you looked at, I don't know, a collection from a 5-year period, including truly terrible ones.
Yeah.
You'll get a much better sense of zeitgeist, interaction, communication. The other place I see this is study magazines. Mike Ashley's 5 books are magazines, are great if you've read them. If you haven't read them, magazines, they're just lists of names. There's none of that sense of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Talk about this over a period of time.
Okay, to Keith, and then we are going to be done. Sorry, Rob.
It's a small point actually, it's how things change. When I started reading fanzines, fan fiction was fiction about fans.
Yeah.
Not fiction by fans necessarily.
And I think there's a distinct difference between the two. Now, it's the same word, but there
Yeah,
are
the
two.
different kinds of fan fiction, and there are very different kinds of fan fiction. Yeah, okay, we got.
All right.
Oh, sorry. I keep my computer on you, so, sorry. I do want to bring people's attention, oh, Claire's got something, the Zoom link, is the corrected link been sent out?
It's been sent out to, I think, all of our supporting and virtual and day and attending members. I believe I've now been able to update it in all of the channels on the Discord as well.
Okay.
So I hope we caught that. We have one or two supporting members who never told us how to contact them, and we may get despairing email from them in a little while.
I would like to thank Kat Brooksy and Graham Tarnock this year for joining us, watching in, and I'm sorry I didn't try to go to you guys for questions. So, thank you all. Cheers.
While you're all here and before the next panel, I think I've managed to catch everyone in this room for registration so far. I believe you all have badges and registration packs. And crucially, you've been able to tell me whether or not you wish the chance to be randomly selected as guest of honor later on. I'm going to be on the next program item, so I'm not going to be trying to people while I'm on that. It seems to be too much like multitasking. But if you see anyone wandering around disconsolately trying to rummage through the boxes, trying to put the badges away, I apologise, I have been for the past hour or so. I will be registering people around dinner and during the rest of the programme later. And if you see anyone who you recognise, and maybe I don't, who's looking a bit lost and wondering where education is, just before Dave Hodson throws them out. And we'll get everyone registered tomorrow. Sorry, it's all been a bit haphazard, but well, you know, we're this sort of con.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Well, really, okay, I don't know.